Hi, bear with me. I'm going to be talking about the case of Birgit Meier. I saw this documentary on Netflix and I thought, it would be nice to share what I learned from it and the story itself. If you like, hang on. If you find it, you don't have the patience, just make this video faster, like 2 times. Okay, so basically, Birgit Meier was a 40-year-old missing woman from Germany. She was from living in a town, in a small apartment, in a town called Breitling, Lower Saxony. And she was beautiful. She had blonde hair, green eyes, and she was a really nice person and a good mother to her daughter. And basically what happened was, she was a photographer, and she was married at the time with a daughter. What happened was she met her then husband. I mean, they weren't married yet, but he met her. They got pregnant, and then his family told him that he has to marry her. So they got married, and he said it wasn't really for love. The husband, his name was Harold, said it wasn't really for love, and at the time they were married for 20 years. She was 20 and he was 22. And then basically he found a different girl and he decided to divorce his wife. And Birgit, she took it really hard. She became addicted to alcohol and smoking and drugs and whatever. I think it was drugs, yeah. So here's a summary of what happened. Basically, she went missing on August of 1989. 1989 is actually the year that I was born. So I was probably, not that it's about me, but I was 1 month at the time. She was 41 years old. She suddenly disappeared from her house and in Breitingen-Morburg. Her daughter Yasmin visited the house but found no traces of her mother, so she freaked out. She ran to her father. She told him her mother's missing. And she ran to her uncle, who was Birgit's brother. And his name was Wolfgang Seelef. And so she told her uncle, who was Birgit's brother, and her father. At that time, Wolfgang, who is Birgit's brother, was the head of the state criminal police in Hamburg, and he looked after all the organized crime, like the mafia. Birgit's case took place around the same time that there were other homicides, and it was also outside of his jurisdiction. So he tried to contact the head of the CIU, which was Mr. Rollert, and requested that he treat Birgit's house as a crime scene. So the police searched Birgit's house and everything around it, but they couldn't find evidence. Because I feel like while I was watching the documentary, it was saying they couldn't find evidence because they were so lousy with the police work. So Birgit and her husband were married young because, as I said before, they got pregnant and they couldn't sustain their married life, and he decided to separate. He started to date other women, and Birgit freaked out. And at first they thought it was a suicide. She disappeared, but they thought it was a suicide because of her state of mind. But her mother and her family said that she would never disappear like that because she loved her daughter too much. The night before, the police found out that Harold had visited Birgit on the evening of August 14th to talk about their divorce agreement. And he was the last one to see her. And usually the ones that are last to be seen with are usually the ones that are guilty, right? Wrong. In this case, at least, it was wrong. So they were investigating him. And Yasmin was the last one to speak to her mother on a phone call. The police were looking for motive and believed that Harold would have lost millions if the couple had divorced. They they thought to themselves that he killed his wife for the money, to save the money that he was supposed to give her. It was entirely baseless theory, cooked up by police, because they just wanted to finish with the case. So, after the case caught media attention, a friend of Birgit's informed Harold that she had a conversation with Birgit the night she went missing, and she mentioned something about a man named Kurt Werner Witchman, and she first met him at a birthday party at a friend, and he had a great criminal record. And so they thought maybe this guy Witchman has something to do with her disappearance, so they brought him in for an investigation. So I want to go over this guy's criminal record, which is really, really bad. So in his youth, Wichtman, he was sent to a young offenders institution when he was 14 years old because someone who was subletting his father's, was renting from his father. He went into her house and he opened the window with like a knife he made, and he started strangling her. And basically, Wichtman did not live at home but at a care home in Wichtershift. He did not want to stay there any longer, and so he stole his money from his mother and father, and his father was a violent man, and he mistreated his kids. So he had a very hard childhood anyway, because his mother didn't care for them, and the father was very violent. So when he was 16, he attacked a girl on her bicycle, and he SA'd her, and he received 6 months of probation. And then in 1967, he threatened the police officers with a small caliber weapon. He was sentenced to juvenile detention for 1 year. And in 1968, 38-year-old Lisa G, she was hitchhiking. No, she was hit in the back with 4 shots. So basically, he's running around in 1968, and he hit this girl with 4 shots from a caliber rifle while she was bicycling near a forest, and she died on the spot. Witnesses, they saw a youth that looked just like Witchman, and he ran away. And the police started a file on him to collect all his criminal errors. Although small caliber rifles and newspaper clippings found in Wichtman's house in his possession, Wichtman was not charged with the murder. Great police work, right? So in 1970, he was sentenced to 5.5 years of juvenile punishment for the rape of a hitchhiker, and he tried to strangle her, and she convinced him to let him go. So he let her go, and then she reported to the police, and he saw the reports in the newspaper, and he didn't like the way he was being portrayed. So he went to the police station to correct the report, to make it right the way he wanted to, because he was like narcissistic and a psychopath. And they took him, and they took him to prison right there and then. So he looked normal, like he presented himself like a normal guy. He got married to a woman, but to look normal, but he always had affairs with other women, and his wife wasn't happy in the marriage. And everyone thought he was like a fancy man, like he took care of himself, and he had many cars. I don't know how he got it, but like later on they found out that he was in debt. And they also thought of him as someone who's like very quiet and has like a very cold personality. And so others described him as arrogant and egotistic loner. So he always wore gloves and sunglasses. In one of his cars, an army sleeping bag for staying outdoors was found in it. And there was binoculars in the bag and maps, and also, what else did he have? He would go to the forest. He lived in a house growing up. When he was growing up, he lived in a house in a cul-de-sac on the edge of Londenburg, directly at the forest of Strightmore 15, which is that was near his house where he grew up. And he had a German Shepherd, and he was also, his political ideology was leaning towards fascism, of course. I believe most Germans are still in that framework of mind, but that's just my opinion. So that was his political attitude, and in secret, in his house, it was attached to gallows ropes. He had like ropes. At the time of the murder of Birgit Meiers, he was married. So, okay. All right, so we're gonna go to what happened next. So that's Wichmann's childhood, and that's his record of criminality. So a friend of Birgit's informed Harold that she had the conversation with her that Wichmann met her at the birthday party and he was strange, and her husband, Birgit's husband, Harold, had also said that Wichmann used to garden for Birgit also. So he became Kurt Werner Wichmann became the main suspect in Birgit Meiers' case. So on October 26, 1989, the police brought him in, and he did not have a proper alibi. His alibi was that they asked him where he was when she disappeared, and he said he was out walking his dog. And he was wearing gloves during the interrogation, and it was found that he also had like this nasty condition. That's why he wore the gloves. He had this fungal infection, and the police wanted him to take off his gloves, but he refused. And they tried to get the doctor to get like a court order to get his hands examined, but it didn't go through for some reason. And the police felt like he was hiding something, and the police, they forgot about it because a lot of times the police like to focus on one person, so they focused on the husband, right? So they wanted to frame the husband for the violent crime because of the motive that he didn't want to give his wife like $500,000 or something because of the divorce. So they couldn't find any evidence against Harold. So they dropped the case on Harold, Bridget's husband, but then they also kept in mind Wichmann, right? They finally, basically, so what happened was that, okay, where were we? So basically they let Wichmann go, right? And finally they decided to get a search warrant on his house, right, where his wife lived. So they went to his house and they started searching his house, and they called him up and they said, "We're at your house, we want you to come here, we're searching your house." What did he do, Wichmann? He picked up and fled. He said, "Yeah, I'm coming," but he fled. So that goes to show the bad police work of the German whatever at the time. So he ran away. And then his brother, remember Bridget's brother? His name was, what was his name? Huygens, what was his name? His name was Harold, no. Her brother was, what was her brother's name? Whatever, he was the police chief guy, right? So then, the case went cold for 30 years. And then Birgit's brother went and reopened the case. He hired himself. Basically her brother, Birgit's brother, his name was Wolfgang Cialaf, and he was really inspired by the book written by Sir Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. And that's what made him become a detective, and he was fascinated with the psychology of the criminal cases. And after he retired, he still wanted to pursue the case of his sister. So he used the expertise that he had to unravel the mystery of her disappearance. Wolfgang wasn't happy with the investigation of the previous investigators and believed that there were a lot of unanswered questions, obviously. So he assembled a team of professional investigators, including criminal psychologist Reinhard Cheder, 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 police psychologist Claudia Bachmann, and lawyer Gerhard Straight and others. In their assessment, Kurt Werner Wichmann was a prime suspect, and they thoroughly scrutinized his background. Born on July 8, 1949, he had a difficult childhood. We already know that. He was in a refugee center. He grew up in a problematic family. He started spending time in the woods, and he showed signs of psychosomatic disorders. Basically, he would go into the forest, and he would shoot with a slingshot, shoot at birds, and then he would bury it, for no reason. He was sadistic, and he liked to hurt animals and hurt, just torture animals for no reason, and he was a sadist, basically. And he had a friend that also, his friend saw his behavior. He used to hang out with him, and Wichmann's friend, he had a friend that was hanging out with him, and he saw Wichmann's behavior, so he freaked out, and he never hung out with him again. His family, anyway, couldn't afford to raise him, Wichmann, so he was sent to a foster home. Psychologically of him explained. So, how did they catch this guy? Okay, so no one suspected him because no one suspected him because he was married and everything, right? So, how was he caught? In 1989, so investigation. Okay, so the Lower Saxony police, in 28 years later, in 2017, after the murders, in 1989, the Lower Saxony police announced the former cemetery gardener Wichmann was a prime suspect in Gord murders. So he was basically like a serial killer, right? Okay, so how was he caught? He was accused of attempted murder, tried to kill a 17-year-old hitchhiker, we know all that, but how did he get caught? So Wichmann was a psychopath. Sociopath or psychopath? Even in his suicide letter, he didn't show any signs of guilt, remorse, or sadness, and he just plainly asked his wife Alice and brother to hold his ownership of the house and never sell it to anyone, and the Wichmann house at 15 Stripemore remains under Alice's custody until she died in 2006. The new owner, Mr. Rodloff, Alice's widow, cooperated with Wolfgang and let him investigate Wichmann's secret room. So after all these years, she let him go investigate the house and the secret room, and the team found Nazi-related videotapes, but the two cassettes especially caught their attention. These two tapes belong to crime shows that broadcast Birgit's case in a double murder called Gord Murders. So now they're connecting those murders with this guy because he's a serial killer. Since the retired detectives had collected a lot of evidence, the police reopened Birgit Meiers' case and deployed Richard Kaufman to investigate further. As Richard took the case, he looked into the evidence collected from Wichmann's secret room. The handcuffs with the bloodstains covered in 1993 caught his attention. And Richard discovered that they were sent to the medical school in Hanover for forensic examination. Dr. Rothamo re-examined the bloodstains on the handcuffs, which matched with Birgit Meiers' DNA. As this new evidence came to light, the police concluded that Kurt Werner was the murderer of Birgit Meier. But where was her body, right? My question is, so basically, before all this happened, before they figured out that Birgit was murdered by him, because they only figured that out recently in 2017, he had basically when they initially searched the house when they initially searched his house and called him, he went on the run, right? And then he got caught at a stop he got caught he got into a car accident, and he got caught there at a stop, and the police arrested him because they found ammunition, like war ammunition, like guns that are used for war. They found that in his car, and then they started going through all his criminal history and everything. So then he was stuck in prison. And that was in I think it was in 2003. 1 second, let me check. It's in 2003. Okay, so I'll tell you. Okay, yeah. So on February 24, 1990, not 2003, 1993, the police knocked on Wichmann's door, but he wasn't waiting for them. He had already fled. The police found a secret room. They found evidence connected to Birgit's case. The police found handcuffs, stain of blood, injections, anesthesia, and whatnot, and all that stuff. Weapons, shooting vests. And at that time, Wichmann had 6 cars under his name. In one of the cars, police found evidence that supported the fact that Wichmann often traveled and slept in the car. They even recovered a buried car on his property, and they found blood stains in the back seat. It became one of the most shocking discoveries in crime history. 50 days after his flight, Wichmann was arrested in an accident. As I said, they found ammunition with lots of cash and checks. He was handed over to authority, and he was put in a correctional facility in Heimsheim. 10 days after his arrest, Kurt Weichmann, 43, committed suicide by hanging himself in his cell in Heimsheim prison. After his death, police only dealt with dead ends and closed Birgit's case. All the evidence pointed at Wichmann and persuaded the police to dig deeper into the connection with Birgit's disappearance, but the investigators didn't bat an eye. Right, so now now we know that he died, how he died, and what evidence they have to know that Wichmann actually killed Birgit. So, let's see, where is her body? Where was her body? Okay, alright, where was her body? Let's see. The question was, where was her body? Okay, patience, friends, patience with me. Alright, here we are. Found it. So we're going to dig deeper into the disappearance of Birgit Meiers. The investigators searched every corner of the 1,300-acre land owned at Kurt Werner Wichmann, but they didn't find any human remains. The officers were exhausted by the search, and they closed the case again. They had found their perpetrator, and for them a body wasn't necessary. But Wolfgang, Birgit's sister, they and their gang secretly investigated the house and discovered an 80 centimeter deep car pit inside Wichmann's garage. Generally, a car pit is about 180 meters deep. Hence, Wolfgang believed that someone had dumped another layer on it to bury something beneath it. He's using his Sherlock Holmes brain. Forensic expert Eileen Job Van Well scrutinized the pit and found a metatarsal bone in an unusual spot. The crew dug deeper and found the whole skeleton buried inside the pit. So the police are lazy. Either they're out of resources, or they're just lazy, to investigate further. The crew dug deeper and found the skeleton, and it belonged to the woman. The head was wrapped in a plastic bag. When Birgit's husband, Harold, arrived at the scene, he noticed tiny ear studs in the skull. He had gifted those earrings to Birgit, and does identify that the skeleton belonged to Birgit Meier. After almost 27 years, Birgit Meier's body was found in 2017 with the help of an investigation carried out by her brother, Wolfgang Salef. So now we're going to hypothetical guess what people think happened that night. Based on his investigations of Wolfgang, his team believed that on the night of Birgit's disappearance, Wichmann broke into Birgit's bedroom. This guess was based on the fact that when the police investigated the house, they found a shoe print. Exactly, we forgot to say that they found a shoe print by the door, and 2 different cigarette brands in the ashtray which did not belong to Birgit. They believed that someone else was in the room other than Birgit. After breaking into the bedroom, Wichmann attacked, drugged, or seduced Birgit. A napkin was found under the bed, which was never sent to the lab, forensic lab, and that could have been a drug he used to make her drugged up. But based on anesthesia found in Wechman's secret room, Wolfgang believed that he had drugged Birgit. The neighbor told the police that she heard a car engine running at 1:30 a.m. during the night of Birgit's disappearance. Wolfgang theorized that maybe while Wechman attacked Birgit in the bedroom, Wechman's younger brother was sitting in the car to distract the neighbors. Wechman died in 1993 and hence couldn't be interrogated, but based on the forensic reconstruction, she was kidnapped and held prisoner in Wechman's secret room in the attic. He handcuffed her in the soundproof room where she spent hours or days. In the end, Wechman shot her in the head and wrapped a plastic bag around her head to avoid a blood spill. What a creepy fuck, right? Anyway, so that's the story of Birgit Meier. Tragic story of Birgit Meier. And anyone who is going through like a divorce or whatever, you know, there's help out there. Like, you don't need to turn to any of those other ways to comfort yourself. You know, you have to realize that, like, whatever pain you may be feeling right now, nothing lasts forever. Nothing. Pain doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. Life doesn't last forever. Everything doesn't last. So happiness doesn't last forever. Sadness doesn't last forever. Pain. So this soon will pass. So basically, what I take from this Wickman freak is that he was such a psychopath that, like, when they were searching his house initially, 30 years before they found her body, he said he didn't kill her. He called them up and he said, just you should know one thing, I didn't kill her. He couldn't admit to his wrongdoing, and then he killed himself without admitting it. So essentially he was a weak coward, in my estimation. Okay, so after Birgit's body was recovered from Wichman's garage, the police finally came to their senses and conducted a full-fledged search of the estate. Basically, the police discontinued any investigation into Wichman after he died, because when did he die? 1993? Yeah, he died in 1993, but they stopped any investigation because according to German law, they don't investigate dead people, which I think is ridiculous and stupid. Whoever made that law is an idiot. They came to their senses and they conducted a full-fledged search, and they didn't find any other human remains, but unearthed 400 evidence related to the case of Birgit. There was wallets, shoes, handbags belonging to different men and women who were either attacked or killed by him. He cherished them as trophies, as serial killers like to do. They like to collect trophies and remember the victims. And and he liked to bury all his stuff on his property too. The videotapes of Birgit's case and Gorge murders were also collected as trophies. So he liked to collect anything in the news regarding his murders. And Wickman probably looked at them and laughed at the police because he had tricked them and fled from under their noses. In his suicide letter, Wickman believed that his days were numbered and that the police would finally find evidence against him. Little did he know that he was dealing with some really incompetent law enforcers. So after they found out about Birgit's, how she died, suddenly they opened all these other cold cases that may have been connected with this guy, Wichman. And with that, my friends, what do we learn from this? That persistence is a good thing. And try until you succeed. Stay safe and be happy. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks for watching.